A lack of financial education and public policy, combined with our friends in Wall Street, have created what we think of as really a looming retirement crisis, both for the employees as well as for pension plans, 401k plans all over the board. We know Social Security is at risk. There's really, and we've seen it already in France, where they raised the retirement age in France, despite all of the protests. And so this is a big deal. So today we have an expert, a research expert in this field, Teresa, and let me make sure I get your last name right. Ghilarducci.
Perfect. Ghilarducci. Perfect.
Ghilarducci. There you go. Teresa Ghilarducci. Should have done that ahead of time, but Teresa Ghilarducci. And Teresa has done significant research on this looming crisis and has written a book called Work, Retire, Repeat, The Uncertainty of Retirement in the New Economy. And Teresa, it's really a privilege and an honor to have you on our show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom.
And if you would, give us a little bit about your background, why you decided to study this topic.
Yeah, real quick. I started really early. I went to graduate school early. I was at University of California at Berkeley, and got there actually by dropping out of high school. But the state of California has a really good pathway for people who want to go to college, no matter what their background is. And I came from, a single mother household, who was really struggling, and so the state of California just kind of gave me a pathway because I got good grades and scored well. And by the time I was 19, I was in graduate school, and I got a job at a kind of a technical center that helps institutions around the state do what they need to do with technical expertise. And I happened to land a job helping my mother's union negotiate for her own pension. And I don't know, there are very many people in the country with that kind of an experience. I thought it was normal because it was my life. But what I was a very early age concerned about, my mother's financial future, our own financial future. And so it had a personal aspect to it. And as an economist, as a student of economics, I really wanted to fix things. And so creating a pension system that helped both the newspaper, where my mother was a clerk, and help the workers plan for their financial future was a perfect kind of technical problem. And from there, I wrote my dissertation about the retirement crisis. It was called The Coming Retirement Crisis, and that was about 40 years ago. Because as a student of economics, we actually looked at demographics, and we looked at labor force participation. We looked at factors that contribute to productivity and factors that contribute to the profitability of companies, as well as the wages and well-being of workers. And so you can kind of take an actuarial model and project it out. 40 years later, I've been writing about this issue from all sorts of aspects: the finance aspects, the well-being aspects, the work aspects. And all that accumulation landed in this fifth book of mine, which characterized the American system as one that's broken, and that one that actually does not provide a dignified retirement for someone who's worked and followed the rules their whole life.
So there's a lot to unpack there, and we will unpack it. I just want to be clear, though, we're not, I don't think anybody's surprised when we say, well, there's a retirement crisis, because the statistics are pretty well known that very few people, really percentage-wise, very few people have saved enough for retirement. Very few people have planned enough for retirement. And it's not like we're like France, where in France, they've never expected to have to save for retirement. They don't make enough money to save for retirement. Our wages here are far higher than the wages in France. And so they expect that was always the deal, right? The government's going to provide for my retirement. Here, that was never the deal. The deal was, well, if I have a pension plan, yes, I expect that to be there. If I don't have a pension plan, then I'm expected to save for retirement, because what I've done is, I remember when I was first coming out of graduate school and looking at a job, and I'm going, well, here are the choices. You could get a government job or an industry job that provided a pension plan, or you could make more money in the private sector, not have that pension plan, and be in charge of your own your own future. And for me, that is, I literally made that choice. I was very clear-headed about that choice. Being in the financial industry anyway, as a CPA, I was pretty clear. I did not want to have to rely on somebody else for my well-being, if you will. It's actually why I stopped being an employee 30 years ago, because I didn't want to rely on it. I didn't want to have a single client, which is what having a job is. The job's having a single client, which is it's actually very risky. It's extraordinarily risky to be an employee. It's much less risk when you have hundreds or thousands of customers than when you have one customer. So that's the first, I think that's the first issue, is that we have trained people that their whole idea is they're supposed to go to school and get a job. And I think actually that's by itself, that is a fallacy. Why are you teaching people to go to school and get a job? Why not teach people to be in control of your life? So that's actually, I think, the first fallacy. And I think a lot of that, frankly, is Wall Street. I think Wall Street is a culprit in a lot of this. And I think the government is a culprit in a lot of this. But let's get to the first question, because you're talking about retirement crisis. And I come from a family where my dad was working until he was 86, and he loved working. Wow. And it was, and I know you've mentioned in some of your articles that, that it provides purpose. It provides, you feel honorable, you're contributing to society. And I remember years ago, I was on a plane, I was sitting next to this couple, and they were early 60s. Okay. So at the time I was probably in my 40s, and they're in their early 60s, and they were coming to Arizona, where I live, and they were living at Leisure World. Okay. So this is a retirement community, and they were talking about their days were spent lawn bowling and going to movies and playing bridge. And I'm going, so you are young and healthy, and you're basically taking yourself out of use. That's what retirement means. Retirement means to take out of use. So here's my first question for you, Teresa. Why should we be expecting to retire? Why is retirement such a big deal? My dad didn't retire. I'm 66. I have no plans to retire. Why is that? Why do we emphasize that so much?
Tom, I really hear you, because I work with the same set of knowledge workers and people who control the pace and content of their jobs. You found a job, you actually capitalize your own job, you're an entrepreneur, you are self-employed, and you control the pace and content of your job. So I looked at the whole population of American workers, the way it's structured, for good or bad, just the reality of the way it's structured, and actually looked at everybody who works and asked that question: who controls the pace and content of their jobs? And it's a handful of people. It's not more than 10, 15%. Self-employed people are often low paid. Some independent contractors are very high paid with professional jobs. So if you just look at the whole group, only about 10 or 15% of us have that ability to control the pace and content.
Okay, I'm just going to stop you right there, because I heard you just say have the ability to. And this is where maybe you and I would disagree on this point, because I think everybody has the ability to, if they have the education to. That's the difference. To me, that's the difference. And to me, where we've truly failed is in not delivering financial education. I think that's the biggest failure. I don't think the biggest failure is the retirement system. I think the biggest failure is the lack of financial education.
Tom, let me just stop you there. We were talking about the content of their jobs, and financial education doesn't help an X-ray tech control the pace and content of how much, how many X-rays they have to do and whether or not they're in what kind of hospital. But let me just make the point. I'll answer the first question, then the promise of financial education. For many people, and this is the research I do in chapter 4, it took me the longest to do chapter 4 because the research was pouring in. And that question was, what does retirement do for people depending upon what kind of job they had their whole lives. And I found that people who did not control the pace and content of their job, retirement, and let's redefine what that meant, actually improved their health, well-being, and sense of purpose. So for many people, their paid work does not give them purpose. It's only when they can control their time and what they do with their time, and it's probably not lawn bowling. Do they really have a sense that they can create a personal narrative about what their work means? And Eric Erickson, the famous, psychoanalytic and person who actually founded the subject of human development, called that the end of life, where, not the end of life, but sort of the third age, where we both are, as a period of generativity, is where caring about what we give back actually matters, and caring about learning and maintaining a connection to the world of ideas and sociability, which means something different for all of us, is really important, more important than it might have been when we were earlier. And so for some people, leaving their paid employment, leaving the hierarchy of work, leaving a place that actually is very stressful, not just because they're doing heavy lifting, or bending and stooping, but that the computer is surveilling their work and controlling the pace, of their work, is the only time they actually have a chance for meaning. So I wanted to lift up the dignity of actually not working for somebody else and being able to have a time in your life, and it's not 30 years for most people. It's only about 12 to 19 years, for the typical person after they leave paid work, to have that time being as healthy as possible and as creative as possible. So I think we actually agree. I actually think we agree. The lawn bowling may actually be a place where you can bond around your partner or around other friends. And that's actually what they mean by lawn bowling. I winced when I thought about lawn bowling as the activity, but if it's surrounded, by kind of learning, or if it's hard to do and you have sociability, so be it. I don't judge it.
Yeah, I struggle with
Yeah,
it.
we
I just
disagree?
do.
Okay.
And the reason is because, so in full disclosure, I am the son, grandson, and great grandson of entrepreneurs. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's in my blood.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
totally.
had the advantage of financial education, right? I worked in my dad's business from the time I was 12. So, I understood what was going on. My mother taught me, and, we were all of the kids there. I'm the youngest of six, and all of us were involved in that business. And so we saw how a business ran. We saw what the benefits are. Plus they had rental real estate on top of that. So they did not rely on, they had very little money in the stock market. They didn't rely on Social Security. They weren't relying on a pension plan. They weren't relying on any of that. They relied on what they built. Okay. And so one of my questions for you is, and I know this is a little off your subject, but you said something that hit home to me, and that is that all these people, that they don't get satisfaction from their jobs. And to me, that's the core, that's the root of the problem, is that why aren't we helping people? Why are we saying you have to go to, for example, go to college? I mean, to me, why, if that's not what suits you, why are we trying to encourage people to go to college when they shouldn't be going to college? I have a son, so I have two sons. One loved college. It was great for him. He was the A student, the scholar. The other one failed like everything, and he's the smartest kid I know. And he's a terrific entrepreneur now, and he's really good at that. But he found that purpose not in college, but he was, it's like you're supposed to go to college, right? Yeah. So my question is, why as a society have we decided, and I think it's fairly unique to the United States from what I can see, because I lived in France. And in France, they start very early with, what do you love doing? What are your natural abilities? And let's get you down that path. And they encourage technology. They encourage, artisans and things like that as much as they do scholars. We
Totally.
don't do that here in the US. So
Hmm.
is that not part? I mean, to me, that's the essence. That's part of the problem is that
No,
why do we
no,
have all these people
yeah.
working in jobs that they don't that
No,
they
I
don't find
get,
purpose with?
that could be another subject for us to talk about because it's about improving the quality of work. That actually lifts up, people going into the trades, people becoming,
Right.
connected with technology and innovating. Some of the smartest people I knew were, masonry, workers and
Yep.
bricklayers. I totally know what you mean. Very clever, witty car mechanics. And I'm in the biz. I teach at a university, and we've actually sold, a bill of goods to a
Yep.
broad population that's somehow sitting in classrooms for 4 years, between the years 18 and 22 is a good thing. I know it's not. I've been teaching, and I wish I could get people out in 2 or give them a trade. They really want to know how to be a speech therapist.
Yep.
Do they really have to sit through literary
Yep.
criticism to become a speech therapist? I'm so agreement with you. But my data and my research is looking at the world we have. And if I could just leap over to where we
Yeah.
start,
Yeah. Please.
your audience is really interesting to me. There is a group of older people who have found new meaning in being entrepreneurial.
Mhm.
I talk about this guy. I liked him a lot. I watched his YouTubes. He's a plumber, and in his retirement, he did not want the hours of work that, being a unionized plumber gave him, but he had a good pension. So what he did with his pension, with his like foundation, with his Social Security, his pension, he started these YouTubes of instructional, videos about how to fix things. My brother is a medical doctor, and he could hardly wait to get out of the emergency room. And he watches these videos all the time because he's back in the garage when he was a kid. He did his job. He was a doctor, and this is what his meaning is. I've never seen him happier. My brother's happy
Interesting.
following the videos, the old guy, who's doing the videos, and he's actually making some money off of it. He has swag and some subscribers. I love this. And we have new research on entrepreneurials and independent contractors after 65. And a good pension system supports that, Tom. I'm saying that I want to give a chance for everybody, no matter what their work life provided them, to have a third age, to have a time when they can create a personal narrative of their own life. And the only way we can do it is to fix this pension system.
No, it's okay.
That
So
is disabled.
let's get into that because you and
Yeah,
I both agree that the system as it is, first of all, it was never intended to be to the 401k. Let's start with the 401k because you talk a lot about the 401k. I know you said you said that you don't dislike you're not against 401ks.
not a
I am.
hater.
I am a
Yeah.
401k hater. I am an acknowledged and prolific 401k hater.
Yeah.
Because I get the pension plan is fine as long as people see that as part of their salary. Okay. What the challenge I
Yeah.
have right now is that you have government workers now that make as much as independent workers and they get a pension plan. And I'm
Yeah.
challenged with that they're getting so much more
Yeah.
than the worker in the what I consider the more productive workforce, because I will never concede that a government worker is as productive as somebody in the business in the private sector. But the 401k, as you know, you and I know, but a lot of people don't know, it was really intended just as a way to supplement. That it was never intended, just like Social Security. Social Security was never meant to be the retirement plan for people. It was meant to be a safety, right?
Yeah.
Just something
Yeah.
for safety, just in case something happened. And it was certainly never meant to last 20 or 30 years. It was, at the time, it was lasting 3 to 4 years. A 65-year-old retirement age in 1945, very different than a 65 retiring today. I mean, I'm 66, and I'm way healthier than that average 65-year-old would have,
Totally.
66-year-old would have been 60
Yeah.
years ago. So, what I think happened is once 401ks came in, and employers and Wall Street both latched onto this and said, wait a minute,
Yeah.
this is a way cheaper option for us. It's defined
Yeah.
contribution, not defined benefit. So we don't have to define what comes out of there. We only have to define what goes into that. And we can require the employees to put some of their own money in some cases, it's all their own money. But I think a lot of employers match. We have a 401k, even though I don't like it, because it's required in order for us to compete in the job market, frankly.
Yeah.
You don't have a 401k, it's pretty tough to compete and we're constantly competing for employees. So, but the 401k was never meant for that kind of a load, to carry that kind of a burden.
Right. If the 401k system was supposed to be our American system, they would have called it the American retirement system, not a obscure section of the IRS.
Good. Yep.
It was meant to supplement an employer-based system, and it never spread. Half of the employers, a little more than half employers, actually had a pension plan when the 401k became possible to save, pre-tax, and about half of employees are now working with employers that have a 401k. You're an employer that actually is in the half that does, but half don't. And so it never spread, even though it was supposed to be easier and more attractive. So that's one thing. I really care about these workers who have lived 40 years under this system now, because the 401k system came in about 45 years ago. They've lived their whole career, and they've been in and out of steadily saving for their retirement, and they're coming to retirement. Let's look at the men who've had kind of steady employment with far less than they need, for lots of reasons. Their employers didn't always contribute. They didn't always have an employer that contributed, and they did not have good investment choices, and they did not have a good portfolio out of those investment choices, and the fees were too high. So many things to hate about the 401k. So even in the best of circumstances, these men are coming into retirement without the $500,000 or $1 million they need. And then if you were a woman under this system, it meant that your household drew on your 401k, if you had one, for child's needs, or a house down payment, or whatever else the family needed for an emergency. And so you come into retirement, with far less than you need. And therefore we have half of the population having to rely on Social Security. What is to be done? Well, this is what I proposed in my book. One, and I wonder how you feel about it, is that the government provide kind of a pension of last resort. If you don't have an employer with a pension plan, you are automatically enrolled with a pension plan on top of your Social Security. And that means, Tom, I'm not going to rely on financial education that starts in 4th grade. I'm not going to rely on people being like you and me, who are so aware of finances, at an early age, because you and me we're future oriented. We had the technical knowledge and the awareness, maybe from our family, of origin, to really care about our financial future. Most people, for better or worse, are not in that situation. Is just automatically, put into this pension plan. So it's called the Retirement Savings for All Americans Act. It's in Congress now. Republicans and Democrats support it. I wrote a paper with someone I would never even talk to at a cocktail party, because our political alignments are so different. But he is Trump's top economic advisor. He was the chair of the Council of Economic Advisor, Kevin Hassett, and me, who advised the other candidate for president. And but we got together as an economist and say, this system is broken, and what everyone needs is a way to save for their own wealth accumulation on top of Social Security.
So let me ask a couple of questions about that.
Yeah.
First of all, so you're saying that those who didn't have a 401k plan, for example, they would be enrolled and the government would contribute. So here's my concern.
Okay.
I'll put this out there, is that, okay, when employers figured out that they could do a 401k, pension plans went away pretty quick.
Yeah.
Okay. Because they go, hey,
Yep.
I had to contribute
Yes.
to a pension plan. I
Yeah.
don't, even if
So-
I match, I mean, I
Yeah.
can tell you in our 401k, we have very
Yeah.
few employees who actually contribute to the
Yeah.
401k, even though we match.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
ouch.
And I think, well, part of it is because they get financial education. So they're
Yeah.
investing other ways. You know, they know how I feel about 401ks, and they're investing other ways than 401ks because
Yeah.
there are much better options than the stock
What
market,
about the
frankly,
pre-tax?
for
Just to
investing.
start-
You can absolutely do it pre-tax. I wrote an
Okay, got
entire
it. Yeah.
book, The Win-Win
Okay.
Wealth Strategy. I'll send you a copy.
I'll
But
buy it. I'll buy it. We should.
the win-win wealth strategy talks about
Okay.
all the other things that the government
Yeah.
actually provides from a tax incentive that are far better than the 401k tax incentive. Because remember, the 401k tax incentive is only a temporary incentive. In other words,
Exactly.
you're just
You get to
deferring
pay.
your taxes. You're not eliminating them, when there are lots of other investments
Sure.
the government would have you make that
I'm with you.
eliminate your
I'm with you.
taxes permanently. So there are much better
Yeah.
solutions. But let's go back to my
No, it's the crowding out
concern here.
argument.
So my concern here is obviously if employers catch on that fast, which they will, they'll I mean, employers, entrepreneurs are not,
Yeah.
we're
your
stupid.
voice.
Okay. We'll figure this out. Well, if I don't have a 401k, then therefore my employees will be taken care of by the government. Why would I have a 401k?
No, I was worried about that too, because most 401ks are better than this minimal catch-all plan. The catch-all plan requires, and it's mostly for lower income, middle income workers. It will require them to put in 1 to 3%. And then if you are below the median income, which is about $60,000 per year, the government will match. But after that, there won't be a match. So for most people who make above the median, their company's 401k plan will be better. And if an employer wants to like just default them into the government plan, then the employer is making a decision to lower their compensation. But that's just theory. What we looked at, because we were worried about that crowding out, is this experiment that's going on now. I don't want to get too wonky, but let me just tell you really quickly. There's about 11 states that have an individual retirement account plan. And that's a little bit like our plan with no match, that if an employee doesn't have a pension plan at work, they're automatically enrolled in a state individual retirement account. And there was real concern among the industry that would crowd out the current plans. And what we found is the opposite, that once employers realize that there's a minimum floor, that they want to actually, when they want to attract workers, they offer a better plan. And so far, it looks like they grow in more plans rather than crowd out plans. That also happened with Social Security. There was a real concern that employers wouldn't do anything if the government came in with Social Security. And what happened was a huge demand for more life insurance products and more benefits, because Social Security isn't that good, and this retirement plan is like a low income safety net.
So let me ask you this question. We know that so I have two questions here. First of all, as you know, there is no Social Security fund. The government uses Social Security to fund whatever they want. It goes into the general fund. And yes, they have this, it's on their books. Okay. I'm a CPA, so I understand they've got an account called the Social Security account. Okay. That doesn't mean there's money there. That just means that there's an obligation there. That's all it is. It's a liability. It's just a liability, right?
Sure.
That is, that actual fund is scheduled to run out shortly. And so that it would cut the benefits to 85% if it does.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the government keeps spending more money on more programs. We saw this in 2022. They spent hundreds of billions of dollars on the semiconductor industry. Then they spent $1 trillion on infrastructure, and then they spent $2 trillion on renewable energy. Okay, and so there seems to be an insatiable desire for money for government programs, and of course, Social Security has become taboo, right? Nobody can touch it. Nobody can, you can't even increase, you know, I'm at an age where I didn't get Social Security at 65 because they did have a plan to raise the age of retirement for Social Security for full retirement. That stopped. Okay. Now there's this big, well, we can't raise it we can't keep raising the age. Why not? We keep living longer. We should be able to raise that age for full benefits. It makes no sense, just like Macron did in France. But my point is that Social Security is in danger. How are we going to add yet another program, which will be another entitlement, which we'll never be able to cut? And now you've got even more of this, you know, we got a $31 trillion debt. How do we pay for that?
Yeah, no, totally. I really address that firmly in the book. It's called The Gray New Deal. And I acknowledge, because I'm an economist, like very much like an accountant, if you're asking for things to be spent for, you have to pay for it. I make a very careful case that we can afford it, Tom. And that if we don't afford it, the costs will come due some other way. We need to make sure that work matters. It actually helps people work more productively if they have some insurance. Social Security is a good program because people agree upon the numbers. Like we just agreed, we know when the actuarially when the money will run out, and we know what the level of taxes are and whether or not increasing them will reduce economic activity. As a card-carrying economist, I really care if too many taxes will inhibit economic productivity. I see it in Italy. I've traveled
you
all
can't
over
tax
the world.
yourself to prosperity.
I mean, the other thing, I mean, in Italy and these other countries that have really, really high tax rates, what happens is that the economy goes underground, that people have a real sour view of government. They're very cynical about not paying their taxes. We aren't there yet. Most people are really honest. We file our taxes, we pay our taxes. Most employers pay.
We have the highest compliance rate in the world.
Exactly.
In our tax system. Italy, do you know Italy?
Oh.
So you may not know this, but Italy actually has two different types of tax evaders. Tax evasion, by the way, is the illegal kind as opposed to tax avoidance, which is the legal kind. They have two types of tax evaders, two levels. One is one's you know, you just get a slap on the wrist tax evader, which is like everybody's expected to do that one.
I know, and it's like it's a badge of honor. I never
Absolutely.
felt so proud of being an American as when I was in Italy, because of the kind of flouting of behavior. And I thought, okay, Italians and Americans, we're all human beings, you know, the global, you know, we're all one. But the difference is the level of tax rate. So I am standing with you. I don't want tax rates to get so high that people avoid it. I am very proud that Americans pay our taxes. But we can actually extend the payroll tax cap to be a little bit higher. I write a blog. I don't know if you've seen it, but I really like doing it. I do it on New Year's Day. And I say, okay, today, what Americans have stopped paying their Social Security tax? I had Elon Musk. He stopped paying like 7 seconds after midnight because he makes $168,000, you know, every 7 seconds. But most of the people I know pay throughout the whole year, like they pay for Medicare. Elon Musk does pay for Medicare throughout the whole year. It turns out there's so many people whose income escapes the Social Security cap, Tom. I was surprised. It's just math. It's not even ideology. That if we made them pay the whole year, it would solve much, not all, but much of the Social Security deficit. The other thing I want to quibble with is that the Social Security Trust Fund does have real assets. You know, these are government bonds. And I love the government bonds I have in my pension plan, so I count that as a real asset. But also, there is a cost to having poor elders in our communities. It may not be, that bill may not be picked up by, you know, by the federal government, which I propose we do pick that up, but it is picked up by, you know, our mayors, you know, our cities, but it is also picked up by family members. I know so many at-risk, you know, 40-year-old households that are really trying to make ends meet, that are also having to give money to their older parents moving them into not like their spare bedroom, like you have to be pretty well off to have a spare bedroom, but
Right.
moving them into their basement, into the garages, that actually is the passion behind like the work I do. I just think that's really sad.
No,
Um,
I agree. And I think certainly our homeless problem, I would
yeah,
hope something like this would help the homeless problem as
yeah.
well. There's no question. Yeah, I'm not, certainly
Yeah.
would not disagree at all that our system is broken. I think that, and I
Or that we
suspect,
can't pay money to help
I
fix.
suspect that there are multiple solutions that need to be done simultaneously.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
First and foremost, could we just have a little bit of financial education in the school system?
sure.
We have zero financial
Yeah,
education in the school system. Could we at least have some? Could people actually understand,
yeah,
get some financial education, understand how do you, I mean, for example, you're asking the question, well, if I don't do a 401k, what can I do, to reduce my taxes? I'm going, I wrote 2 books on this, tax-free wealth and the win-win wealth strategy. The knowledge is there, it's out there. The question is, how do we get it to people? Because
so,
there
yeah,
is good, there are
yeah.
good financial education providers. The challenge is that we have not made it a priority. So I think that's one. And personally, for me, that's number one thing we need to do is get financial education. But I do agree that I think that there are people that we do need safety nets. Okay. Now I'm not a proponent of the 40% social security tax that Germany has. Okay.
Yeah,
I think that's a bad idea. Okay. To have a
yeah.
40% social security tax, and Germans are
I do too.
hardworking.
Yeah, I do
They're
too.
hardworking, but
Yeah, I do too. I
that's
do
not,
too.
that's kind of not American, right? We're about having our own property. We are a capitalistic society, and that's why we've made the innovations that we've had. But we
I
do
mean, they're
need,
capitalists too, and it's but I too high of a rate of voice taxes. Can I just talk about financial education
yeah,
for a
would you please?
minute? Because I actually was I would love to be. It's hard to do, but for now, I was for many years a Boy Scout counselor for
Mhm.
their personal finance badge, and I learned a lot from these boys. They were getting a badge for Life Scout
Right.
and Eagle Scout. And I wrote one of my books, How to Retire with Enough Money, actually based on the Boy Scout manual.
Oh, nice.
I found the most important thing I did with them is for them to create their own budget.
Mhm.
And I remember one kid saying, I work for my car and my car gets me to my job. And he was having a very important self-reflection about his own life at 17.
Yep.
He tried to help, one of the instructions is to help your family plan for a purchase or like a vacation, and their family members would not participate. He was trying to be financially responsible, but his boomer parents, were not cooperating. So I feel really strongly about the National Education Endowment for Financial Education um, strategies. They have a really good website. But what I think the most important thing to do for kids is to understand that they will have to be responsible for their financial
Right.
future. I think
Agreed.
they have to understand, what Einstein thought was the most powerful force on earth, which was the power of compound interest. And the reason why is not to save, but to avoid debt. I think that I'm finding in my data, Tom, that the bottom 50% have not gotten ahead. And even that next 40%, because they bought a house like they're supposed to. They were, paying their mortgage off, but then the home equity loan came in and
Yep.
kind of extracted that equity. And so I'm finding that people are no better off over the past 40 years than they were in the 1990s. Their home equity is about the same when you adjust for inflation, because our debt creating institutions have
Yep.
kind of overwhelmed our wealth creating
Well,
institutions.
I don't know if you know this, but so I was in Washington, D.C. in the 1980s in the National Tax Office for what was then Ernst and Whitney, now Ernst and Young.
Yes.
And that was when actually they passed the tax bill that disallowed the deduction for personal interest. And they said, but home
Yes.
mortgage interest, you
Oh,
got to deduct. And I
yes.
actually prepared the testimony for Ernst and Young before Treasury to say, look, if you do it this way, what you're going to do is you're going to turn homes into a piggy bank.
I am going to put that in my paper. Thank you for that.
It is. We absolutely saw it. We saw it coming. And when you do that, so this is where tax policy is so powerful, right?
Yes.
I mean, if you think about it, nobody does a 401k if they don't get a tax deduction for it. That incentive is a huge incentive for people to put money into a 401k.
Enough income. If you make enough income,
right? That you're paying tax in the first place, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And your median person at $60,000 probably isn't paying income tax.
Well, they don't get anything from the government, right? I am totally going to look that up and put that into my paper.
Yeah, check that one out. Check that one out. That was in the 1980s. And then, so do you think? So in conclusion, I get your point about this Retirement Savings for Americans Act and handling those people that can't, giving them a safety net, which is just kind of compounding on the Social Security safety net, which, by the way, my listeners will be shocked to hear that I have actually said many times that I can't quite understand why we have a cap on Social Security. I can't. I mean, it's such an easy. It's a huge raise. It's a huge revenue raise. The challenge is that if it were raised, the problem with the Medicare tax, as an example, is it doesn't all go to Medicare. It doesn't. There's a Medicare tax, so-called Medicare tax, that Obama put in place that's on investment income.
I know. Right.
That does not go to Medicare.
No, it doesn't. I know.
It goes to the general fund.
No,
so,
I know.
The challenge, I think,
we have to do it right.
I think the challenge that entrepreneurs have is we're okay. Truly, we want our employees to succeed. As you'd mentioned before we got we started recording, is that entrepreneurs do care. We care about our employees. We really do. Yeah. And I think small business entrepreneurs, I think we need more of it, not less of it. And I think there's a big push in the government right now to have fewer entrepreneurs. There's an absolute attack on small businesses, starting with this compliance requirement for listing all the owners of a small business, but not of a big business. And, even down to who owns it through a trust, the beneficial owners of a trust. I think that is an attack on small business. So we can, small business owners do care. So we do want our employees to have, whatever, and we want to give them what we can afford to give them. We can't afford to give them as much as a big business might be able to. Apple can certainly contribute more than a small, 5-person CPA firm. But at the same time, I think that there are just, multiple things that need to be done, starting with financial education, starting with, even job education. I love what you said that, not everybody should go to college. I mean, we don't have, why are we forgiving student loans and saying, look, we'll have college for free.
Totally.
Everybody should have free college. I'm just going, why?
Why?
And then
college for 4 years. Why? No one's ever asked that question.
Exactly. Totally. And then I would finish up with, working's not a bad thing. Somehow we've turned work I think in a lot of circles, including government circles, work is an enemy. I think work provides dignity. Work does provide purpose. It does say I'm contributing to society. And I don't see work as being I personally don't see work as a bad thing. I love to play. I love sports. I love travel. I love all those things, but I love contributing. And I think most people want to contribute. And some of them I get, like my wife, her great contribution is her kids and her grandkids. And that is an amazing contribution. She also is a CPA. She also has her own business. But she does not work as much as I do. And the reason is because she wants to, that's her primary contribution. So I think those are all good. But can you give us, besides the RSAA,
Yeah.
What are two or three things that you think that we ought
Mm.
to be doing ourselves, and
Yeah.
particularly entrepreneurs? What can we be doing to improve the lives of not just ourselves, our
Yeah.
customers, our clients, our employees, and others?
Right. So for your employees, I think financial education, it sounds like that you're doing is really important, but heal yourself, and make sure that you have a plan to save for your own retirement and there impart those kinds of knowledge. I know I'm doing that with my work groups, with my colleagues. The first thing I always say is you have to have a budget or we can't have a conversation. You have to know what money is coming in, what's money coming out. So that's the most important thing. Also, you should pay attention to your vote. Your vote is an asset and you should use your asset wisely. You should pay attention to what your politicians are saying about Medicare and Social Security, because for most people, that's the most important source of wealth. It's equal together about $500,000. And so you have to husband that. The other thing I would advise is debt management, which is important. One of your generative things you can do for family members, every single young person I know, look to their adults for clues about about finances. It's really, I think you should pick up the Boy Scout handbook and help in your generativity with your kids and grandkids to impart some of that wisdom that comes from, a little book, or my little book, How to Retire with Enough Money. It costs under $10 because that has the same kind of idea. And that's often managing one's own consumption. So many people, Tom, especially women, want me to kind of reconfigure how much they can really live on. Because they don't have enough. They don't have the $500,000 or $1 million to maintain their standard of living. So I spend a lot of time actually doing what social workers do, make sure that they sign up for every single program they're entitled to. The take-up rate for food stamps among the elderly is only 60%. Like 40% of the elders are leaving money on the table, basically fruits and vegetables and oatmeal on the table that they could be getting every month because they don't sign up. Those are the kinds of things to do, is being savvy, about what you're entitled to.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
We have a whole nother discussion on entitlements.
Yes, I hope we can do. Thank you for your
This has
time.
been
Thank
great.
you.
Teresa, this is seriously, I appreciate you, your willingness to allow me to
Appreciate
push
you
back a
too.
little bit.
Yeah,
And
how fun.
I love the banner in the conversation, because
Yeah, too.
there's no question that, and I don't like the word retirement, as I made
Yeah,
clear,
it's a weird
but
word.
but
Yeah,
but
yeah,
but I think the idea that we feel safe, I think that safety is a big deal. And I think that we definitely have a homeless crisis, and we definitely have a underemployment. I think
yeah,
I think the way we actually compute how employed people are is such a bad fallacy, because we're
yeah,
saying we only have 3% unemployment when we probably have 20% underemployment, because either they're not employed full time, or they're just searching for a job, but they're not in a job, and those people
yeah,
somehow get taken out. I mean, the way they compute it, I think is horrible, because I think people should, I think we should have, I think we have plenty of jobs. I think there's,
yeah,
I mean, just more people living longer doesn't mean we won't create more jobs for those people. That
yeah.
historically has not been the case, right? We
I
have twice as many people as we had a few years ago on this earth, and yet we have more jobs for everybody.
Yeah.
So,
In my book, I really talk about that part of the Great New Deal, is to make jobs much better for older people. What do you think of this idea? Lowering the Medicare age to 60 and making it a first payer. That means it makes it a lot cheaper for employers to have older workers, if the employer has has a health care plan, because each employee costs an employer about $30,000 to have a health care plan. If you make Medicare first payer, again, it costs money, but somebody pays. it would make older workers a lot more attractive. I really like that idea.
I like the idea of making I like the idea of making older workers more attractive because they should be more attractive. They have more wisdom, they have more knowledge, they have a willingness to share that younger workers don't quite
They
have.
also actually come to work. They're more
and they do show up. They do show up to work. They have a great work ethic as a general rule. So and I think
selective.
Unfortunately, there are some countries that have a much better view of their older citizens than we do. And I wish we would recognize that more. I mean, I was fortunate. I knew my grandfather, and he was, and I loved my grandparents, and I had that family influence of those older generations, and I saw their wisdom growing up. And my own dad, who lived until he was almost 90, and I saw his wisdom and what he did just for so many people well into what we would consider retirement age, which he never truly retired. And because he never retired from life. And I think that's your point, is that it's okay to retire from a job you don't like, but it's not okay to retire from life. And we want to make sure that people have the means from which to be productive in their life as they get older.
I love that, Tom. Yeah, just as a final word, we said finally about 4 times, but this is I'm just going to repeat your words as a final word, is that people need pensions and health in order to create a job for themselves in retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
You're
Remember
welcome.
and let's not forget that part of this discussion has been financial education. I love that you're doing financial education. You've got your book. My Bible for financial education is Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which my friend Robert Kiyosaki wrote, because that's the alternative, right? The alternative to Wall Street is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It is entrepreneurship and investing in real assets and providing housing for people, providing jobs for people, providing food for people, and providing energy for people. And when we do these things, when we get this financial education, pass it on to our kids, pass it on to our friends, pass it on to the young people, what's always going to happen is ourselves will end up making way more money, and we get the right financial education, pay way less tax. Thanks, everyone.
Good. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, Teresa.
Bye-bye, Tom.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.